Hello. So this week we're continuing our discussion of verbal communication and transitioning over to nonverbal communication. So just a couple things to remind us from last week. So today we will talk about some of the key concepts of verbal and nonverbal since they have a lot of overlap. And these are our general objectives, yada, yada, yada. You'll have the opportunity for application in the activity that you'll do after watching this. So remember we had those characteristics versus functions of language last week. So that's a characteristic is a feature or distinguishing quality. A function is an action performed. So we got the eye. Remember we talked about the eyes. And they allow us to see. They can be green. They allow us to see. So characteristics of verbal language, they're symbolic. They're governed by rules. They're flexible. They evolve. It evolves. It's cultural. And we did that activity where we watched the TED Talk and then we applied some of this information, the characteristics, the functions, where it shapes thought, how we think about things, shapes meaning. It's how we're able to name things and attribute this is that is this, that sort of thing, right? It's like, what do we call something we don't have a name for, right? We talked about the jackfruit, that whole thing. It helps us craft conversations. And the most important thing that we do with interpersonal communication, our most important function of language, is managing our relationships. So today we're going to talk a little bit more about these nonverbal communication codes. So we've got kinesics. That's everything about interpersonal communication that has to do with, or nonverbal communication that has to do with body language, facial expressions, how much movement we use, right? Like I'm a very kinesthetic person, if you couldn't tell before now. And that makes an impact on how we communicate with person. Our little friend here on the screen, probably not doing great, right? Kind of like has distress written all over them. So we can kind of tell what that looks like, right? And then moving over to haptics, that's the different ways that we use touch, right? There's 6 different types of touch. Refer to McCormick and Morrison for help with that. But these people probably know each other well. They're using like an intimacy touch, touching each other's bodies. They're standing closely. I would guess that they are partners and they're probably having a baby together if I had to read the room here. So thinking about how we might use touch to communicate something, like if we're trying to get someone's attention, if we're trying to offer sympathy, maybe touching someone when you know they don't want to be touched and what that communicates, right? This is all a different type of way that we might use touch to communicate even when we're not speaking. Also, we have vocalics. That's everything that comes out of our mouth that isn't a word. So it's speech, rate, pitch, tone, right? My tone when I'm like this versus my tone when I'm like this, right? It probably communicates something differently. You can read into that a little bit more. And then proxemics, that's how we use space. Like this is the classic example of like, I'm not touching you. I'm just in your personal space, right? Like you're this close to someone, anyone that has siblings, I'm not touching you. And you're like, just get your hand out of my personal space, right? Because we have intimate space, private space, public space. We have these different types of space. And if we enter someone's personal space bubble, what does that communicate to us? Are we like, are you just not from the US? Like, why are you standing so close to me? Are you trying to be intimidating, right? Like, what does that communicate? And as always, context is going to guide how we read something. Remember, there's no dictionary for nonverbal communication, so it can be more ambiguous, as we've talked about a little bit. A couple other nonverbal codes. How we use time, right? Like in the US, too soon. In the US, we talk about like, we have all these different ways of talking about time because like we're monochromatic. Like we just think or that time exists on one space and we're just moving forward. We're burning time. We got to save time. We have a whole cultural phenomena of daylight saving time to try to help us find more time in the day, right? We're obsessed with time. Where other cultures, I couldn't name one because I haven't been to this culture where people aren't obsessed with time. I apologize. But might have a more lax, like, hey, I just got caught up having a good time with some people and I didn't make it, no big deal. No one was counting on me. Where we're here, we're like, where were you? We thought you were dead. Like, if someone ghosts us on, you know, like a date somewhere, we're like, oh, you're supposed to be there at 8:15 and then they never show up. Like, you're either dead, or if you just got caught up and carried away and didn't come, you're dead to me now, right? We have our different ways of dealing with time. So how we use time, if we're early, if we're late, what that communicates to someone as a result of that is the important thing to keep in mind. Our physical appearance, you guys brought this up in the seminar, just how we dress, what sorts, like if we dye our hair, like different emblems that we might have, like are wearing a wedding ring, like these different things that are nonverbal communication communicates to other people. If we have piercings, if we have tattoos, like what does that communicate to other people? And then finally, we have our environment. That's how we have things laid out. Like you see, I'm in my office right now. This is how my coworker lays out her space. Mine looks pretty similar. I've got some pictures on my board, so it just kind of shows like, hey, I'm a person, I have friends. I put pictures over here. We don't have a lot of clutter. Neither one of us are really into clutter. So it's a good symbiotic relationship. But how you organize your room or your house or even your car might be a direct reflection of maybe what you've got going on in your mind. Even if you're not telling people I'm not okay, but if you get in my car and there's stuff all over the place, probably like, oh, Harkins is not doing okay if she has this much clutter going on in the car. Her brain probably looks like that too. It's true. Send help. So what are these differences between verbal and nonverbal communication? Here's the reveal. They share all of the same characteristics and the same functions, but less. So focus on the characteristics. They share all the same characteristics, but nonverbal communication is multi-channel. So we were just talking about the different nonverbal communication codes. You can be using all 7 codes at once. Whereas if you're verbal, like you're talking, as soon as you stop talking, that channel is closed off. But you can still be gesturing, you should be standing too closely to someone, you should be touching someone. Like it's multi-channel, like it's continuous. It keeps going long after the verbal message is done. So keep that in mind. You know, it's the difference between like, I'm doing great versus like, I'm fine. You're like, whoa, the multi-channel read of this situation is probably not fine. Also, nonverbal communication has more meaning. For that same reason, the whole not fine example, if I say that I'm fine, but I have an attitude and I'm standing a certain way and I'm like kind of like putting myself off from folks, we believe that more than the verbal message, right? Nonverbal communication accounts for up to 93% of all communication in any scenario. Maybe just 3%, or I'm bad at math, you know this, 7% for the verbal message. So definitely more believable. And the activity that you all are going to do after this will definitely relate to that a bit more. And it's more ambiguous. Again, different cultures, different people, we use nonverbals differently. So in the US, like this hand signal, we're like, yeah, rock on, metal hands, like whatever you want to call it. There's a region in Italy where this means it's the horn of the bulls, like the something del Toro. Okay, guys, my Spanish speaking is not what it could be. And it means like your spouse is cheating on you. Like there's a certain way to do it. So you're like, careful about that hand gesture. Or one time I was in India and I was riding around on a little moped and someone did this and I was like, hi. And the person I was riding with was like, they're not waving at you. They're telling you that your headlights are on and it's daytime, so you're not supposed to have your headlights on. I was just like, okay, just thought we were being friendly here. So especially if you're going across cultures, keep in mind that you might have to read into the nonverbal communication a little bit more because it's more ambiguous. Again, there's not, and here's our final point, there are fewer rules. There's not a dictionary for nonverbal communication, or maybe there's like some urban dictionary about it now, but it has fewer rules in general. So we can't just look up the meaning every time, and it's not something that we're taught. We learn most of our nonverbal communication quite informally, or we learn it from our parents. I remember when I was a kid, I just loved staring at people. I was like such a starer. I mean, I still do it, but my mom's just not around to be like, Danielle, quit staring. I'm like, so interesting. That person doesn't look like you or my dad or me. There's only 3 of us. They look different, or, you know, anyways. So staring, that's what you learn. It's not always polite or appropriate. I don't know. I'm a starer. I haven't stopped. So thanks out loud. Hopefully this will be helpful for you today. So part of the activity you're going to complete is that you're going to have to watch a thing. You guys know that, like, this is a classic OG Harkins assignment. You're going to watch a thing, and you're going to define a couple things, and then you're going to share examples from the thing that you watch about these differences between verbal and nonverbal communication. So I hope that you all enjoy that. And if you have any questions, go ahead and email me, and I'll be here for you. So hope you guys have a great day, and I'll see you after the break.